Hey, what's up, Hexxers? This is Function here, and this is part 1 of my PvP champion breakdown. There's 20 PvP champions in total, and right now they have all been spoiled. There's 4 in each color, and today we're going to be talking about the diamond ones. Remember, all champions use basic actions with a once per turn limit. If you have any questions about how champions work past that, I would say, why don't you go look at the video which I posted earlier this week, and hopefully you can answer those questions. Let's dive right in and see what we're working with. The first champion is Dimmitt. Dimmitt is a necrotic warlock and has 2 diamond threshold, 2 charges, target troop gets life drain this turn. Well, let's talk about the pros and the cons. The first pro is it helps in a race, so if you and your opponent are just beating face and seeing who can kill the other one the fastest without really interacting with each other, this is going to be a great ability. It's going to gain you some life as soon as you attack and land with a creature, and all of a sudden your opponent's going to have to do that much more work to be able to catch up. The next pro is it only costs 2 charges. You're going to probably be able to very easily use this on turn 2 so long as you played a 1-drop, and then, you might be able to use it on turn 4 and a couple more times throughout the course of the game. Since it's only 2 charges, you're going to be able to activate it multiple times for sure. Alright, but what are the cons? Well, the cons are, it doesn't impact the board. After the turn's over, it no longer has life drain, and, unless you actually gain some life, there wasn't any impact from actually using the ability. Another con is that it requires a troop. Well, some champion abilities don't all target troops. A lot of them do involve targeting a troop, but not all of them. And that is definitely a drawback in a sense that you can't use it as often as if it just didn't have a target, if it was all troops gain life drain or something like that. Another big con is it's useless on defense, so yeah, definitely reread the ability one more time. Target troop gets life drain this turn, so meaning that when your opponent attacks, your troop is no longer going to have life drain. You're not going to be able to block with a defensive creature and potentially gain some life. You don't want to get blown out by forgetting that. Another con, it's prone to removal. You target the troop, it gets life drain, and then all of a sudden it gets murdered. Well, you just got no value whatsoever on your charge ability, but that's just going to be an accepted sacrifice sometimes when you're playing this guy, that sometimes you're not going to be able to get an attack through. Finally, the last con is that it has double threshold. Since it's double diamond, you're not going to be able to hypothetically play a sapphire 1-drop and then use the charge power on turn 2, because you'll probably only have 1 diamond at that point because you played a sapphire on the first turn. So that's definitely a con. You're going to mainly want to play this guy in decks that are more heavily diamond so that you have access to that. You know what? I think I'm forgetting one pro. Let's see what it is. That's right. His name is a palindrome. So Dimmitt is the same, spelled forwards and backwards. And actually, if you go and look, all the necrotic champions are palindromes. I don't know if anybody's mentioned this, or maybe you haven't noticed it, but I think it's pretty neat. So there you go. Let's move on to the next guy. Alright, so One Eye Open. One Eye Open is a really cute coyote ranger. Look at him. He's got his bow and everything. It is kind of awkward that his ability is steadfast, but let's say what it is first. So, it's diamond, 1 diamond, 3 charges, troops you control gain steadfast this turn. With that sweet bow, you would think it would be maybe swift strike, or troops you control can permanently block creatures with flying, or maybe target troop could. But this is still good. Don't get me wrong, it's a great ability. So what are the pros, what are the cons? You can still block with your team. So, you can attack with your entire team. Because they have steadfast, when they attack, they're not going to exhaust. On the following turn, they'll all be available to block. This is great. Next ability, or next pro. Abilities that require exhausting will still be available. So this is definitely something to keep in mind. If you have a bunch of value creatures in your deck that have maybe an exhaust ability that does something really good, either locking down an opposing creature, or drawing you a card, or any number of really good stuff, well, they'll still be able to use that. Even while attacking, they could use it in the same combat. They could attack and exhaust one of the opponent's creatures, or whatever the ability is. This is definitely something to keep in mind, especially while drafting, because sometimes those abilities can be really, really strong. The final pro, well, it's a single threshold. Since it's only 1 diamond, you'll be able to play this in just about any deck that is using diamond. Because by turn 3, even if you're only splashing diamond, it's still pretty likely that you'll have it available to you. The biggest con here, he really doesn't have too many cons, but the biggest one is it's weak when you're behind. So, if you only have 1 creature on the board and your opponent has 3, well, giving that 1 troop Steadfast isn't really going to help you too much. Another con that I didn't list here, but is definitely one to keep in mind, is if your troop already has Steadfast, well, giving it Steadfast again isn't going to help it at all. It already has it. So in decks that have creatures with Steadfast, it's not going to be the most useful thing. But let's move on to the next one and see what we're working with for the rest. Alright, Palamedes the Righteous. He's our third champion we're going to be talking about today, and he's a human warrior. His ability is 1 diamond threshold, 4 charges, target troop gets permanent +1/+1. So, what are the pros? Well, first off, the +1/+1 is permanent. It doesn't go away at the end of the turn. It doesn't go away when the creature goes to the graveyard. It doesn't go away when it goes to your hand, or gets shuffled into the deck. No, it's permanent. That's one of the things I love about Hex. You can give stuff permanent. You can permanently write on a card and alter it for the rest of the game. I think that's awesome. It helps a troop break through combat. So you could help one of the troops break through combat because now maybe you have a 3/3, they have a 3/3, but you pump it, now it's a 4/4, and suddenly you can attack into them, and it's going to be harder for them to block. They're going to have a combat trick or any kind of thing, or they're just going to have to take extra damage. So when the board's stalled out, this will be a pretty useful thing to have. Finally, it's really nice on evasive troops. So if you have a flying troop or a crush troop, well, now they're going to be able to hit that much harder since they're able to hit more regularly since they have evasion. Alright, why don't we move on to the cons? Well, just like the other 3 so far, it requires that you have a troop in play. So if you don't have any troops, it's not going to be any use to you. Once again, it's prone to removal. You target your troop, you get it +1/+1, and then it gets murdered. Well, you didn't get much value out of that. And this is even more important since it's 4 charges. It's high cost and what I would call low impact. If you target a troop and use all 4 of your charges to give it +1/+1 and then it gets murdered, well, it's going to be a while until you're able to use it again. So it being high cost, low impact, you got to be pretty confident that when you use this, it's going to make a difference. Why don't we move on to the next champion? Alright, so our final champion we're looking at today is Lady Elizabeth Stewart. She is a human cleric, 1 diamond threshold, 5 charges, create an Amanthian Elite, and put it into your hand. Well, the first question you probably have is, what's an Amanthian Elite? Well, it's a 3/3 troop, 3 attack, 3 defense, and it costs 5. Yeah. Why don't we do the cons first? Because they're a little bigger than the pros in this case. Well, kind of pretty much the cons are you just slowly reread the card. The troop goes to your hand. It doesn't go into play. You have to pay 5 to play that troop. And it's only a 3/3. It has no abilities. Yeah. Sad panda. So in this case, it's kind of, you have to use 5 charges and 5 resources just to get a 3/3. That's not exactly what we would call value. Granted, you know, some champions hardly do anything for you. They don't impact the board. Dimmitt doesn't permanently impact the board. This one, you're, in a sense, drawing a card almost. So, why don't we talk about the pros? The cons are pretty big. I guess I don't really need to keep hammering that one in. Oh, she's got a sweet hammer. See what I did there? I just came up with that. Alright, what are the pros? The troop might be able to synergize with something. Yeah, it definitely might be able to synergize with something. Maybe you have a bunch of Inspire guys, or some other effect that when you put a troop into play from your hand, that it gets some special ability. You draw a card, or it gets stronger, any number of things. Well, yeah, so that it might help you in that regards. Still, you're paying 5 for a 3/3. I'm not too excited about that. But one more thing is, it's an extra card in hand. Now, this is something that might not immediately make sense, but think about it for a little bit. There's some decks in TCGs that care more about how many cards you have in your hand than what cards you have in your hand. They could all be bad cards, but so long as you have 6 cards in your hand or something, then you can do something awesome. And you know what? This is going to help you hit that number. It's going to add 1 more card to your hand. Even if it's not a good one, it'll be 1 more. There's definitely a couple of interactions like that that are interesting with cards that they've spoiled so far, and I'm actually trying to build with them a little bit. On that note, let's do my super secret what's the pick. So in this super secret what's the pick, the scenario is which do I want to build with, and as bad as I think Lady Elizabeth Stewart is, I want to try to build with her. I've got a couple decks that I've been brewing up right now, and I want to see if she fits into them at all. Really, if she doesn't fit into these decks that I'm working on, well, I don't think there's any hope for her. She might be interesting in draft or in limited, but in constructed, she's going to be a pretty tough sell, I think. One more pro that I didn't even mention is, look, she's got like her sweet hammer, and she's yelling, and has like that pose with the hammer up in the air. And look, the orc in the background, he's yelling, and he's got his sweet axe, and he's got it up in the air. Oh, that's so awesome that it worked as a pro for me in this video. Yeah. Alright, so that's just about the end. Why don't you guys support my fellow YouTubers and writers? There's a whole bunch of people putting out some really awesome Hex content out there. Why don't you give them some support and keep them motivated and know that you appreciate all their work that they're doing? Why don't you go visit the hexdatamine.com site? There's some really sweet stuff on there. There's an awesome deck builder, all kinds of other cool stuff, including sweet draft simulator. Yeah, you can go kind of draft with the cards that have been spoiled so far. There's a lot still to be spoiled, but at least it's still fun to do. Finally, if you liked my video, please subscribe. I really appreciate it, guys. Less fail, more function.